an initiative by Russell Book Club for promoting debut authors, poets, etc., and giving them a platform to showcase their talents. Today, we are honored to have among us Mrs. Venuka Goyal and Mr. Sourabh Mukherjee. Welcome, authors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I, Vanshika Mishra, will be the moderator of the day. Firstly, I would like to introduce our respectable guests. Midday calls Sourabh Mukherjee one of the frontrunners in Indian crime fiction, and the Asians call him one of the most popular writers of Indian crime fiction. Sourabh Mukherjee is the author of the true crime fiction book Death Served Cold and the psychological thriller novels The Sinner and The Colors of Passion, and even The Shadows of Death. He has written a collection of short stories, Love's Lost, Beyond 22 Yards. The audiobooks of his titles are also very popular. He received the Golden Pen Award in the Sulekha Monsoon Romance Contest 2014, the Juggernaut Selects Award 2019, Litroma Hall of Fame in the Litroma International Symposium on the Literature Festival 2020, and the Man of Excellence Award from the Indian Achievers Forum in 2021. He is invited regularly to book fairs and literary events across the country. His books have received calls from the readers and the book critics and the mainstream national media. On the other hand, we have Mrs. Venuka Goyal, an IITian alumnus of the Ohio State University, a professionally trained scientist currently teaching at the university in Central India. Venuka Goyal has lived in the world of academics all her life. While her profession has included reading scientific literature, she has also read a lot of fiction while growing up. During the lockdown, Venuka started writing fiction to escape the tough realities of her life that was turning out very different from what she's imagined. And she accidentally ended up writing a novel. Her first novel, You're Stuck With Me, was published in August 2021 and was among the top hot releases in the Kindle store India. Since then, there has been no looking back. Venuka ma'am writes contemporary fictions based on her experiences and focuses on the nature of relationships and marriages in modern India. Would you like to add anything?
No, not really. I think you did a pretty good job. Although technically, I can call myself Dr. Venuka Goyal also.
Yeah, sure.
Since I have a PhD. But it's okay. Mrs. applies also. Yeah.
Sure.
Either one is fine.
What about you, sir? Anything you'd like to add?
That's absolutely fine. I think your introduction is absolutely fine. Nothing much to add. We'll of course talk as we go.
Definitely.
Yeah. I'm glad I have the opportunity to interact with such awesome and luminary authors. With your due permission, I would like to start the conversation.
Sure, go ahead.
My first question is for Venuka ma'am. When did you first realize you wanted to be a writer?
I don't know what's the definition of a writer, someone who writes. I've always enjoyed writing. I think the first time that I realized that I could write something decent if I put my mind to it was probably in 6th standard.
Wow.
I mean, we all study English in school, right? So my English teacher, she gave me, gave all of us, they gave the class an assignment. And I ended up writing about the emotions of a tree that is about to be cut down. And it ended with, the woodcutters had arrived or something. And the next day when I read it, I was like, wow, did I really write it? And then my teacher gave me one nice star and one excellent and everything. So I think that was the beginning. I think teachers play a big role in, shaping who we are. And my English teacher in 6th standard, Shama Singh ma'am, she was really pretty good. And I was really, encouraged by whatever, feedback she gave. And it gave me confidence that if at some point of time in my life, I feel like writing something in English, I think I should be able to do it. So yeah,
so she must be proud of you probably. If she now knows that you're such a big author of such great novels, she must be so proud of you.
I hope so. I haven't met her in a long time. I haven't gone back.
Are you still in contact with her though?
Not really, because, once we start living our lives, we, move cities and move countries, we lose touch. But I do remember her fondly. I have visited my school once a few years ago, but I didn't manage to meet her at that time. And, a lot of the teachers who used to teach us have retired now. So
Yeah.
it's difficult to trace them, but through Facebook and all, I am in touch with a couple of them, but unfortunately not with her. So yeah.
And what about you, sir? When did you decide to become, and when did you realize that you could become an author?
Oh, I think, very similar story actually. And, I remember I started writing when I was very young, and some of my poems that I wrote, and I used to write those very short poems, when I was a child. And they got published in some of the children's magazines back in the day. And I think all of us sort of do that, when we are kids. And I remember, my dad used to bring all those diaries at the beginning of the year, and I would fill it up with stories and poems, and doing my own illustrations and all of that. So I think that continued. I also kept writing off and on through high school and college, and then I started working. Of course, it was a very demanding day job, so the writing took a bit of a backseat. And then I think something very interesting happened about 7 or 8 years back. So in 2014, I just saw this online short story contest at sulekha.com, and the theme was a monsoon romance. And I wrote a short story. So the format of the contest was that first they'll put up the story on the portal, and people would go and vote for the story if they liked it, and then they would shortlist some of the entries, and then there's a panel of judges who sort of rate those stories. And I ended up winning the Golden Pen Award. So, and that was a bit of a revelation for me. So what I realized is that first of all, people in general must have liked my writing. Otherwise, why would they vote for it? And then there was a panel of judges, and they were all very established literary figures of the country. And then I said, if they have also liked it, which means that there is some substance in what I'm trying to write. So this was 2014, and with that newfound motivation, I started writing my first novel, which was In the Shadows of Death, and that came out in 2015. So I would say that 2015 is sort of the start of my official writing career in that sense.
I think that,
6-7 years, and once you start writing, I think you have a lot of stories inside you. You start realizing that, okay, there are so many stories and ideas that I have in my mind. So I sort of kept on writing, and today we have a good number of books, novels, and short stories. So that's how the journey has been so far. Touch wood.
And so we all know you write such fabulous crime thrillers. What inspired you into this genre? Because mostly it's just fiction and other stuff. You went into crime thriller. How was that?
So one is obviously my personal interest in the genre, because I am also a voracious reader. I mean, in spite of my schedules, I make sure that I read every day. Even if it is like 20 pages before I go to sleep, but I still do that. So I'm a voracious reader, and thrillers and crime fiction, that's one of my personal genres. And I think somewhere, when you read a good thriller, or when you read a particular book, you feel like you end up thinking that maybe I can also write something like that. So that I guess that was the trigger. And then what I realized is as I started writing some of these crime stories, what I realized is that we often end up putting books in slots. So we say that, okay, this is a specific genre, this is a crime thriller, that is romance, this is mythology. So we often do that. But if you really go through these books, and if you really dig deep, you would realize that even in a crime thriller, there are lots of very interesting relationship stories. There are very interesting love stories. In fact, a lot of my fiction novels, Death Served Cold, of course, is a non-fiction. But if you look at some of my other fictional crime thrillers, like The Sinners, or The Colors of Passion, or In the Shadows of Death, there are very interesting relationship stories at the core, which essentially drive people down the path of crime. So what I found in this genre is you can actually talk about a lot of different things. And but having said that, like you mentioned in introduction also, I often keep on writing short stories, which are actually in a variety of genres. So the Beyond 22 Yards series, for example, it was more about stories of love and crime from the world of cricket. So that was a very specific area. And again, it's more like a true, based on true stories. Then there's another series that I wrote called It's All About Love. And there are like 7 Kindle books as part of that series. And those are all about, different kinds of, love. And it's not just romance, but also the love that you feel for your family, and, interesting stories that are built around that. So I do all of my experimentation with my short stories, which I write in different genres, but the novels are mostly about crime. So that's how it works.
And Venuka ma'am, I had a question from my side. It wasn't in the script. I just came up with it. Writing fiction is tough because I personally am into literature. So writing novels about fiction is very tough. How did you start writing fictional novels? Because we all have been through that stage where we just read about something and okay, similar we write something. So how did you get into fiction writing?
Um, I see the stories that I write are very realistic. Like I don't write something which is I don't know. There's so many different types of books. My books are about realistic situations that could plausibly happen in today's world. And to be very honest, every book has a part of me in it somewhere. So my the kind of fiction that I write is I write stories that come to me based on what I see every day in my life. And I sometimes try to imagine, like, you know, if in my life, instead of this, if something like that had happened, how would I react or how would someone else react? So I've always, as a kid, I didn't used to talk too much. People who see me now find it very surprising. But as a kid, I was relatively shy and I used to observe everything but say very little. But that doesn't mean that I wasn't thinking. I was thinking all the time. And I was, you know, I'm even trained as a scientist, like I told you, you know. So our main work was to just observe situations and analyze them and, you know, try to make sense out of what the data is telling us. So I have collected data about many, you know, molecules and all, you know, in science, and then made plausible stories about what this could mean. I have done that for a long period of time as part of my work. So now in fiction, what I do is I look at so much data out there in form of so many people that I've interacted with. And, you know, living life for 35 to 40 years gives you some breadth of experiences. So I tap into those experiences. I look at the things that bother me about certain things that I find in the society. And then I look at certain things that I see people struggling with. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I wrote my first novel when I'm, you know, so old, so to say. So I don't know if that would help you out in any way, but for me, it has kind of been like that I write fiction, which in some way or the other taps into my experiences. It's not, you know, I can give it, in fact, for me, writing fiction is easier because I can give it twists and turns based on whatever I feel will engage the audience more, you know. In a true story, you have to be faithful to the plot. And in real life, things may move a bit slowly. It may not be as exciting. But in fiction, you can make things move faster or, you know, come up with certain, you know, scenes that may be relatively less likely to happen in real life, but they can still be realistic. So that's kind of my take on fiction. You know, for me, the kind of fiction that I write is just, you know, you have read Even You're Stuck With Me for Life, right? I mean, that book is based in the city that I'm living in right now. I live in
Oh,
Indore, and I've written a book about a couple living in Indore. And in that story, Neeti is living as a bahu in a joint family. I live with my in-laws. My situation is different. I mean, I didn't get married under the circumstances Neeti did, but I do live with my in-laws, right? And I did move from a bigger city. Like Neeti was in Delhi first, then she moved to Indore. I used to live in Bombay. In fact, Ronit used to live in Bombay for his job. I have lived in Bombay for many years. So many of the settings that I'm taking, I've actually lived in those settings. So when I write about them, it can seem a bit more realistic for someone reading it. So yeah, the first few books that I've written are like that. In fact, my other book, this one, which I call On the Bright Side, it's a very short story. Like all three books of mine have different lengths. Yeah. So On the
yeah.
Bright Side is about a postdoctoral researcher living in the US. Now, I did my PhD in the US. I lived there for 6 years in the Ohio State University. Here, even, you know, this guy is living in Columbus, and Ohio State University is the biggest university in Columbus, Ohio. So I've written about settings that are familiar to me. And then I've stolen little bits and pieces of stories from the people that I've interacted with and mixed them up in a way that supports a particular narrative that I feel very strongly about. So that's just the way that I go about it.
My next question is for Saurabh, sir. How do you come up with the titles of your books?
That's a very interesting question. I think before I answer that, to the point that Venuka was making, I think that's the biggest strength of literature, making it relatable to people. And I think I always believe that, the success of a book is driven mainly by that. Because, when a reader is reading the book, if he or she is able to relate to what you are saying, I think that's what engages the readers the most. And the challenge that I've always had while writing a crime thriller is I put a lot of emphasis on the motivation behind crime, right? Because see, today what has happened is, if you look at the genre across the world today, of crime thrillers, it is no longer about, stolen gems or, somebody stealing a portrait like we used to have, right, back in the day. Now this is more complicated, it's more psychological, and it talks about, the psyche of the human beings and, the antagonists. And it's very important to build a very believable characterization, even if somebody is doing horrible things, but there has to be a rationale behind that, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the reader should feel that, yes, if I were in a situation like that, who knows, maybe I would have also acted in a same way. So I think to the point that Venuka made, I think it's very important to make it relatable. So yeah, completely agree with that. Now coming to your question, Vanshika. So I think the title is one of the most important things for a book, because obviously there is this whole so it's very interesting, right? So when an author writes a book, for him, it's purely art, right? You're creating a book. It's there's a whole bit of romanticism around the whole thing, but once the book is written, it sort of becomes, it's almost like a a commodity, that the publisher has to sort of take to the market and reach out to the readers and all of that. And I think the title of the book, the cover of the book, I think these are extremely important things, because when I walk into a bookstore and I see a book on the shelf, the first thing that draws me is the cover and the title of the book, right? And then I'll probably, so that's the first step. The next step is, if I'm attracted enough, I'll pick it up, go to the back cover and read the blurb. So that's the second step. And then, if I like everything, then of course I'll go and buy it. If the author is new, if it's a Jeffrey Archer, of course nobody will do that. You walk into a store and say, okay, what's the new Jeffrey Archer book? You just pick it up. You don't even read anything about it. We also have similar authors in India as well. I just gave Jeffrey Archer as an example. So I was conscious from the beginning that these are very important aspects of a book, and so it's a bit of a challenge that the title has to be relevant to your story. At the same time, it has to be something which will sort of attract the attention of people. So it's mainly driven by that. Thankfully, at least till now, what has happened is the title that I have thought of for the novel, purely from a content perspective, my publisher has liked it, and he has gone ahead with that. I haven't had a situation where I've thought of a title and then we have had a lot of debates about that. Thankfully, that has not happened so far. So yeah, so that's the significance of the title, and typically what goes on with that.
So do you when do you know what the title is going to be? Like when you start writing a book, do you know what the title is going to be, or does it?
Sure, because once you publish the book with the title, there is no looking.
You're stuck with it.
You're
stuck with it.
Yeah, you're stuck with it. But for me, I don't always know what I'm going to call the book when I start writing.
Oh, I get you. I got your question.
Yeah.
Oh, you are right. So I think when I start writing, it's always an XXX at the top, and then I start writing the novel.
101.
And I think somewhere down the line, it sort of hits. And sometimes I even I make it more challenging for myself. Like if you look at Death Serve Code, for example, so there are 7 stories, and if it's an anthology, then it's a bigger challenge. So first, you have to think of a title of the collection, and then there's an individual title for every book. And in fact, my next novel, which is a fictional novel, which is again coming up maybe sometime around May, June, we sort of threw a bigger challenge at ourselves. We said, okay, why don't we start naming each chapter rather than doing, a chapter 1, chapter 2. So that was, an even bigger challenge where, even we had to think of a title for every chapter. So yeah, but it's fun. Usually the story leads you to that title. I don't remember having to really think a lot or spend sleepless nights thinking about that. So at some point, once you have made some progress with the story. But yeah, at the beginning, probably you won't start with the title.
True. Makes sense.
My next question is, what is your favorite part and your least favorite part about the publishing and marketing journey?
Let me take that. I think forget about the parts. The whole marketing journey itself is not something that I really enjoy, to be absolutely honest with you. Because when I like I said, right, and I think the Venuka would also agree. So we started writing organically, right? It's not like We had a career planned out, and like next 5 years I want to get there. We never did a plan like that. As a matter of fact, I tell a lot of new authors not to do that. Because then you get too caught up in the whole research. I mean, I know of people, and I read an article a few years back by one of the Indian authors. It was an excellent article, and what she was saying is that one of the problems with new authors today is that she calls them spreadsheet authors. So she says that a lot of these new authors, even before they have written the first word of their novel, they will sit down with a spreadsheet and they will look at, okay, what are the books which have sold in the last like 3 years, right? What is the genre that everybody is buying? How do you go up Amazon rankings and stuff like that? And then it's almost like it becomes more like a business process, rather than a work of creativity or art, right? So that is something which I very strongly discourage. And when I started off as an author, it came to me as quite a shock of all the hard work that you have to do actually after you have finished writing the novel. And as a writer, the whole process of writing is an enjoyable journey for me, right? We really like doing that. But the whole marketing is something which, as authors, we are not even accustomed to. Even in my day job, I work in an IT services company. So even there, it's not like I am planning, how to do PR and all of these public relations and marketing and promotional activities and all of that. But so I generally find it difficult. But what I've also seen is that you also should not be too aggressive with that, because if it's too in your face, then I think it also drives people away. So I think striking the right balance, and there are always wonderful people like yourselves who give me a chance to sit in front of a camera and talk. I think that makes it all the more easier. So yeah, when I don't overdo it, but yes, I know I have to do it. Not that I enjoy it a lot, but yes, it is part of the publishing process. That's what I've understood in 7 years.
Yeah.
Anything you would like to add, ma'am?
Yeah, so I mean, this is something that I found out a long time ago, that whenever, even if you're doing a job that you love, there are going to be some aspects of that job that you hate. And actually, I'm fairly new to writing and publishing. It's been less than a year since my first book came out, so I'm not very experienced. That said, I've been writing a lot for the last 15 years. Even as a scientist, we write a lot of papers and we submit them to international journals and we get them published. And then, you have to, for more visibility of your book, paper, you can have a cover image, this, that, blah. So I've been in a profession which is less structured than an average profession. Like being a scientist, you are on your own a lot. You have to decide what research you want to do. You have to write grants and ask for funding. You have to, it's closer to being like a government funded entrepreneur kind of a thing when you're a scientist. So for me, it was a comfortable kind of a journey beginning to write, because I was already used to a life where I was writing a lot and where I was doing other things to, either get material for my writing or, get visibility for my writing. So it's a part of the package. And frankly speaking, I don't dislike the whole publicity thing. I mean, I like talking to people. I like interacting with people. I, enjoy, like right now, it's a lot of fun. You get to learn a lot, at least in the initial phase. Right now, I'm enjoying, because there's a huge learning curve. Since the day I published my book, when I published my book, I didn't even have an Instagram account. And I did not, like, since I had a Facebook account, there was this sitting kind of dead Instagram account that was sitting there. And someone contacted me. They were like, oh, I came across your book on Goodreads. It sounds interesting. Give me your social media handles. I'll post a review and tag you. I was like, first of all, I called my sister and I was like, what is a social media handle? What is the meaning of tagging someone?
No, I totally relate, because you know what, I got on Facebook in 2014. Can you believe that? I was probably one of those dinosaurs, who didn't have a Facebook account in the first place. So I got on Facebook in 2014, and that too because my book was coming out. So my publisher said, Sourabh, how can you even think of publishing if you are not on Facebook? And Instagram, you won't believe it. I got on Instagram last year. Can you believe it? And my Sourabh is, and he published 3 books, without me being on Instagram. And then, my publisher said that Sourabh, it's high time, you have to be on Instagram, because that's where all the action is. And apparently Facebook is now passive. So, everybody is on Instagram. And I said, fair enough, I'll do that. So yes, That's
I think the
exactly what
younger
I meant.
generation is more active on Instagram.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
And that's how it
and,
happens.
and now, now that I'm on
Yeah.
Instagram, now I realize, what I was missing out. So
Yeah.
I
The
understand
engagement
what you
rate
meant.
and everything. Yeah. So it's been a journey. Like with social media, I mean, when we were in school, something called Orkut began,
Yes, yes.
And then all my friends hounded me, like, "Ah, na yaar, karenge."
How
And
come you're
then
not
suddenly
on?
everyone started becoming less active on Orkut. And then somebody was like, "Why are you not on Facebook yet?" And then they pushed me. When you're in that age, when you're in school, college,
Yeah, yeah,
in that age, you have this peer group that drives a lot of the things that you
exactly.
do. And I was always the last one to join the bandwagon, I guess. So I was on Facebook purely because my friends bugged me into doing it. And then for many years, like for 6 years, when I was in the US, my family was in India. So they were like, put pictures on Facebook, we'll get to see what you're doing. So, I mean, my relationship with social media changed a lot once I published my book. And I don't, when I'm doing something, a new initiative, I try to take it as like a all-inclusive package, as a whole journey. I don't like to think about it, keep, I hate this part of it or like this part of it, because I mean, then that just, I think it gives you unnecessary stress about various things.
You have to
I
accept it.
take it, yeah, I just accept it as a part of the package, and I try to enjoy every aspect of it. And I've always been someone who likes to learn new things. So right now I take it in that spirit. I'm learning new things and it's all fun. We'll see what happens a couple of years down the line. I don't know. Yeah, so it's been
You
fun
must
for
have
me.
had quite a lot of experience. Do you have any message for the youth?
I don't know, Saurabh, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I can. I think the first thing that I would want people is to read. And I'm not saying this just because I write books, but I think it's very important to read. What I'm seeing today is a big challenge that I think all authors face today. Is this whole problem of attention deficit, as I call it. There are so many distractions around us today that I don't think the average youth is even reading. There is it's not that they're not consuming stories. They are consuming stories. But I think the medium has changed. So they are consuming stories through web series and through all the, I think especially with the pandemic since last year, because everybody has been tied home, OTT platforms
Yeah.
have gained a lot of prominence. We have movies releasing on OTT. I don't think it'll ever be the same again, right? It's only the very big movies will probably come on multiplexes. Otherwise, everything is going to be on OTT. And people are binging all the time. And there is so much of content, across all of these platforms. And in the middle of all of these, there are authors like us, who are sort of coming up with a book and asking people to read the book. So I think, but I still think it is very important because what I also keep telling a lot of young boys and girls is that what reading does is it allows you to imagine. When you are seeing the story, right? When you are seeing the story, on your TV screen or on your mobile screen, you are not having to imagine anything. It's almost like they are spoon feeding you. How this person looks, what does the environment look, what does the setting look like, when something is happening. But it's only when you are reading a book that you start imagining, right, what this person looks like, right? What does the road look like, along which somebody is walking, for example. And I think one of the reasons why people like Venuka, myself, we eventually became authors is because we read, and we developed that power of imagination, and that helped us to create stories. But I think if you are always watching things, without having to apply your mind, it sort of cuts down your imagination to a large extent. So when a lot of people tell me that, okay, what is your tip for young authors? I said, no, forget about writing. Read first, right? Get into the habit of reading and imagining. So that is something that I would definitely want people to do.
Anything you'd like to add, ma'am?
Well, I feel like, when we were young, we were told TV aa gaya hai, the world is going to be ruined. And now we tell our kids mobile phone aa gaya hai, the world is going to be ruined. I believe that, the younger generation today is very, very smart. I see my kids going to school. The way they are taught ABCD is very different from the way I was taught ABCD. Education is changing. And I believe that, whenever a young person receives a piece of advice from somebody who's very old and experienced, like I count myself as relatively old and experienced, you should take it with a pinch of salt, because the world that we grew up in was very different. And the world that you will be running one day is going to be very different from the world in which we were successful professionals. Take it with a pinch of salt, but take general advice, okay? Take advice about, reading is a good habit. Don't take advice about what you should be reading.
Yes.
Right? Always take generic advice from older people, not about the specifics. Live your life. And whenever you are faced with a situation where you have to make a difficult choice, take responsibility for that choice, because you will be stuck with that life. Right? So, I mean, that's all I can think about right now. And it was a really great experience talking to all of you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. So thank you for joining us. I hope I could cover up everything.
Absolute pleasure. And, I must congratulate, Rahul, Suri sir and Vanshika yourself
Yes.
for running this, because it's very rare to see people devoted to, literature and trying to, find out what authors have to say. And it's always so very encouraging and motivating to see this. So I think you are
That's
doing
so
a
true.
great job, for the cause of literature. Thanks.
Yeah, it's good to see school children reading.
Yeah,
So that's
exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank
Congratulations to you
Yeah,
for
thank
doing
you.
this, actually, really.
you.
Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vanshika.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Good afternoon.